Are we about to see an explosion of foreclosures? What about a senior tsunami of retirees selling their homes, which will lead to a housing collapse? What about interest rates? That's our topic for today's video, and we're going to get started right now. Let's talk first about foreclosures. What exactly is a foreclosure? A foreclosure is when the bank takes back the property, meaning, let's say a buyer buys a home for $300,000. The buyer loses their job and can no longer make their payment. The seller has no equity, and the bank takes back the property. The seller is essentially upside down in the loan. Are we going to see an explosion of foreclosures? People will see a headline or a YouTube video that says foreclosures skyrocket. That's where you have to take things into context. Let's look at foreclosures during the past 4 years. Foreclosures have tripled since the pandemic. That's true. That sounds bad, and it sounds like a lot of foreclosed homes, until you understand that during the pandemic, we had an all-time record low in foreclosures. In fact, the government had a moratorium on foreclosures. Most people will read a headline and then stop. They don't bother with reading the actual article. And why is this the case? They're trying to get you to click. It all boils down to impressions. If someone can spice up a headline, it generates clicks. An article that generates impressions generates ad dollars. The more impressions, the more money the article makes. What if the article was titled, "Foreclosures Almost Back to 2019 Levels"? Is that going to get the same number of impressions? Probably not. Now let's look at foreclosures now versus 2009. In 2009, we had over 500,000 foreclosure starts. Compare that to today when we have well below 100,000 foreclosure starts. Why don't we have the number of foreclosures now? Now, there are several reasons. Now, if you're looking for an FHA loan that has been foreclosed upon, you'd want to visit hudhomestore.gov. At the time of the GFC, there were a substantial amount of homes in Omaha on that site. However, today, if you look at the entire state, there's only one home available. If we look at the MLS stands for Multiple Listing Service, and we're looking for bank-owned properties. A bank-owned property is known as an REO. REO stands for Real Estate Owned. These are bank-owned properties. So in our market, if we look at active homes on the market that are bank-owned in Douglas and Sarpy County, we come up with a total of 4 homes on the market. During the GFC, there were hundreds of homes that were bank-owned properties. Some agents, their entire business was built around REO properties. Now there's hardly any. Before the GFC, you could get 100% financing. Remember those loans, the 80-20 loans or the 80-10-10 loans? Before the GFC, you could finance 100% of the property. The buyer purchased the home and had zero equity. I was selling real estate back then. At the time, FHA kind of fell out of favor. It was rare to do an FHA deal. We also had a thing called stated income loans, meaning the lender didn't have to verify your income. It sounds ridiculous, but today you need to have a job, and the lender is going to verify that you have a job before they loan you money. Back in the early 2000s, there was a push to encourage home ownership. Now, that's a good thing. However, you need folks that can actually pay back the loan once you give them the money. Now, before the GFC, we had people using loan products such as adjustable rate mortgages that didn't understand what they were getting into. They just barely qualified for the loan, and then when the rate adjusted, they could no longer make their house payment. They had no equity, they couldn't make their payment, and the home went back to the bank. During the recession of 2009, we had unemployment go from 5% to 10%. We had sustained job losses over several years. When people lose their job, they can't make their payment. People who don't have jobs don't buy homes. We had unemployment go up. We had inventory go up, which meant less demand, more supply. Home prices went down, and that increased the likelihood of foreclosures. What's the difference now? Now it's much different. It's much harder to qualify for a mortgage. Now, only the best of the best qualify for a mortgage. The government, after the GFC, passed the Dodd-Frank Act. It was designed to prevent the excess risk-taking that led to the GFC. You need a job to buy a home, and you need to prove that you can pay it back. The buyer of today is much more qualified compared to the buyer back then. Number two, if we look at the MLS, we had an excess of inventory. Even locally, back then, we had an excess of inventory. During the great financial crisis, we had over 5,000 homes on the market. Today, we have around 1,500. During the GFC, homes sometimes took weeks or even months to sell. Many sellers had to hire multiple agents. The median days on market back then was over 48 days on the market. Today, the median days on market is at 5 days on the market. Builders after the GFC were much more cautious when it came to building. We had several builders in our local area go bankrupt after the GFC. After that, builders were much more careful. In fact, they didn't build enough homes in the decade following the GFC. After the GFC, we had more regulations and restrictions in place when it comes to building homes, and that's going to drive up prices. For example, when a developer is developing a piece of ground, you used to be able to fit 4 or 5 homes per acre. Now, with regulation, you can only fit 2 to 3 homes per acre. That makes ground more expensive, which is going to drive up the price. During the past decade following the GFC, we were spoiled with low interest rates. So low that people got used to it. Low interest rates mean more buyers into the market. We have low supply, higher demand, prices go up. Then 2020 rolls along, and then we have the lockdowns. The people who lost their jobs were in the entertainment and the food services industry. Those people lost their jobs. It was a government-induced job loss, and it was your wait staff and those type of folks who lost their jobs. Those folks weren't the ones that were buying homes. The Federal Reserve came along and overstimulated the economy. They lowered interest rates. When the rates got so low, it made buying a home so affordable that it overstimulated the housing markets. Prices shot up. Now we have a problem of affordability. Interest rates do not have to go back down. We have had such slow growth coming out of the GFC that rates were kept low to help stimulate the economy. Inflation was under control at the time. If inflation remains high, count on interest rates to remain higher for longer. Look at interest rates in the 1970s. The interest rate in 1973 was around 7.5%. If you decided to wait until interest rates came back down, that would be 20 years later when rates fell below 7.5%. In early 1973, the median closed sales price for a home was right around $30,000. If you had waited until interest rates came back down to purchase in 1993, 20 years later, the median closed sales price for a single-family home was $125,000 in 1993. If you had waited, you would have missed the boat. What if we see a recession? Now, there's a good chance we'll see a recession. There's always going to be a cycle of booms and busts. Nobody can predict the future. However, in a recession, home prices don't necessarily have to come down. Sometimes prices go up during a recession. If all the people who were predicting a crash were so good, why weren't they predicting the boom 3 years ago? Why were they not telling you to buy in 2021? Some of these people were predicting a crash back then. They were predicting a crash in 2021. Whenever you buy something, you pay market value at the time you buy it. Hindsight is 2020. Looking back, I wish I would have bought more homes back in 2009. But guess what? Back then, homes sold for market value. And today, guess what? Homes still sell for market value. Should you buy a home or should you wait? That's going to be completely up to you. If you don't feel comfortable buying a home now, don't. But ask yourself a couple of questions. Number one, how long do I plan to live in my new home? 2, How much do I have saved in an emergency fund? 3, how stable is my job? If I lose my job, how quickly can I find a new one? 4, do I have enough money set aside for repairs and maintenance? And number 5, if you're married, how stable is my relationship? Let's say you're relocating to a new area. Maybe you should rent for a year. See if you like it. Learn the local market. Then buy if after you decide to stay. Buying a home is not always the best thing to do. I'm a firm believer in home ownership. Obviously, I sell real estate for a living, but there are times when it makes sense to rent. When you're relocating, you have to learn a new routine, a new climate, new friends, and sometimes a new job. That goes along with a lot of stress. It's okay to take your time. Home prices go up and home prices go down. Prices are in a constant state of fluctuation. I bought several rental properties in the early 2000s, and a few years later we had the GFC. Did the value of my homes go down during the GFC? Of course, yes. Did I panic? No. I've purchased rentals and I've made money and I've lost some money. You have to have more wins than you do losses. When I lost money, I at least tried to learn from it and try not to make the same mistake twice. Sometimes you learn more from your losses. I am convinced that you can make money in any market and you can lose money in any market. You will make some mistakes. That's called life. I think it's better to learn from other people, but you have to be very careful about who you're listening to. Every day, somebody somewhere is saying some bullshit reason why the housing market's going to crash. It's the silver tsunami or it's the young sexless men. Just because you have a camera and a YouTube channel doesn't make you a financial analyst. Now, let's talk about that silver tsunami. According to Meredith Whitley, a Wall Street analyst who predicted the GFC in 2008, she says that baby boomers who are looking to downsize will be adding to the housing inventory. Now, I have 2 problems with this theory. Number 1, if they're selling, then buying, they're not adding to the inventory. In fact, downsizing means they're now competing with entry-level buyers. Number 2, more seniors are aging in place. Let's say they have their home paid off. Even when they pass away, many of these homes will not necessarily go on the market. Many of them are being taken by a grandchild or a child who can't purchase a home now. Now, this same analyst now says that another housing market collapse is coming thanks to sexless men. Okay, I've listened to her interview and I'm not convinced that this theory has any legs. The real estate market is like any other market. It's 7th grade economics. You've learned about supply and demand. Nothing has changed. Understand that when a headline has the word sex in it, it's going to generate clicks, especially when it comes from the Oracle of Wall Street. Then magically they have some authority. Be careful about who you obtain your information from. Just because you see a headline doesn't mean it's true.